while Bitcoin at some point becomes that sort of safety, that hedge, it is still a risk asset, and people have to be careful of that. If the markets do start to dump out, I still think Bitcoin does head lower and potentially much lower. And you just have to be careful in this scenario.
In today's video, Chief Market Strategist of InTheMoneyStocks.com Gareth Soloway tells us all about his latest analysis of the charts as well as his predictions and price targets for Bitcoin. He believes that we could possibly see Bitcoin's low in the coming months. Soloway shares his opinion regarding high inflation rates, the stock market, the crypto market, and the Fed.
What are your thoughts right now on CPI and whether or not the Fed does start to look at some alternatives, at least for a reversal?
Yeah, so I do think that the CPI number tomorrow comes in a decent reduction, but again, I don't think it even gets us near the goalpost of where the Fed can ultimately start cutting rates. So I'm in the camp with zero hedge. I just don't see cuts this year. I think again the risk that you're seeing Jerome Powell face is that essentially if he cuts too fast, he's going to have a whole new can of worms with inflation roaring back. And so he's even said that before, right, with Paul Volcker. Listen, we can't repeat the mistakes of past, so I'm going to be hard-edged. So I actually expect them to really be hesitant on cutting rates, even if the economy starts to spin into a recession.
Do you think we'll continue to see more increase in rates, or do you think we'll see a pause and for a long period of time?
I'm more in the pause camp. So I think the Fed has kind of gotten to this point. They realize that these hikes have broken the banking sector in many ways. They don't want to create any more problems. We've seen so many banks go under. So many banks have been close to going under. So I'm in the camp where they're pausing, but they're going to be hard on keeping rates where they are for an extended period of time. And I don't think equity markets have priced that in at all. I think equity markets are much more on the Fed will come in and save the day as soon as things get tough mentality. And I just don't think that's going to happen.
Flight of capital, do you feel that we're going to continue to see this going into the money markets?
So for me, I do see that there's going to be some continued rotation out of the banks in terms of deposits, but I do think at least the fear of losing your money in a savings or checking account is kind of now a distant memory, right? We've seen every bank that has failed so far. The Fed or the FDIC has said, hey, we'll pay out whatever the savings amount is, no matter if it's above 250 or not. So I think that aspect is gone, but I do think that there's so much dead weight on these banks, and I think there's even more to come with commercial real estate issues that are going to pop up later this year. So to me, I'm looking at a banking sector that is going to be what I would call zombie banks, meaning that they're carrying massive amounts of unrealized losses. They don't have to actually mark to market these losses, but they are going to only grow over time. And at some point, that's going to be another pressure cooker on the system.
Individuals say, I just don't have as much faith. I'm going to remove 50% of my capital out of traditional banks, and I'm going over here. Where do you see that going?
So I do think metals. I think gold obviously is a recipient of that in some respects. I think crypto has shown glimpses of being that with Bitcoin, and early on when the banking crisis hit a couple months ago, we saw a big pop in Bitcoin. The one thing I would just point out is that recently, as early as last week, I believe it was, we saw a couple banks down close to 50%. The banking sector was looking in trouble again. There were rumors about even more bankruptcies, and Bitcoin actually fell that day. And so what that told me is that while Bitcoin at some point becomes that sort of safety, that hedge, it is still a risk asset, and people have to be careful of that. If the markets do start to dump out, I still think Bitcoin does head lower and potentially much lower.
As Bitcoin trades under 28K now, dipping back into its low over the past few weeks, what are your thoughts on where this heads from here?
Yeah, so the 30,500 level was just an absolutely impressive technical range on Bitcoin. And the reason why, again, that was such a wall and price had so much trouble getting through it is if you go back to 2021, just before the big run up to 65,000, you could see that low right there. Then we go right over here, that mid-cycle bull market cycle low was right there and then right over here. So it made sense that Bitcoin again could go up into that level and then was rejected. Now for me, I'm watching this 27,000 level super closely. Right now we're just above it at 27,700 or so. If that breaks, that kicks off another round of selling that probably takes us to 24 to 25,000. Now the one thing I will say, and this is something I continue to be overall still thinking this is a bear market in crypto, that this is a bear market rally. The thinking there is not only technical, meaning we haven't got through this 30,500 level, but it's also a concern based on what we're seeing in Pepe and based on some of these other speculative crypto assets. And again, you've been around a long time, Paul. When you see that type of speculation, that's not the bottom of a market, that's the top of a market. And that to me is a big issue that I hope investors really do recognize.
They're pretty solid on Bitcoin, Ethereum, a handful of blue chips, whether it's Solana, Avalanche, etc. When you look at those, would you consider yourself bullish on those, top tier tokens, or do you feel that you're still in a bearish position for the market currently?
I think off of these levels, I'm still on a bearish position. And again, if we were to establish ourselves over that 30,500 level, I think things could change just a little bit in terms of the Bitcoin market maybe being in their bottom phase or having a bottom. But right now, I'm honestly, my biggest fear in the crypto market is twofold. One, it's that you don't have regulation yet, and the government is very. They're purposely delaying regulation to bring out the CBDC first, right? So it's the China playbook. And I know it's kind of crazy we're following China, but China outlawed Bitcoin. Then they brought forth the digital yuan, and now they're letting Bitcoin kind of come back again. Yeah. The U.S. government didn't take that's case, but what they're doing is they're not giving any clarity in regulation. They're saying, oh, it's a security, it's not, it's this and that, to the point where Coinbase has had to say, we're going to sue the SEC to figure out what the heck is what's going on here. That is on purpose so that they can launch their CBDC. And what that does is it keeps big money out of crypto right now, right? I mean, you don't have hedge funds, you don't have a lot of these bigger players feeling comfortable to invest in it until the government unveils their CBDC, and then I'm sure it'll coincide with some regulatory stuff. So for me, that's a risk. And also, I look at the stock market and I see everywhere signs of complacency. The VIX being where it is, the pattern formation is a replica of the psychology of the market chart, where just before it has a major collapse. And so if the equity markets are going to drop big, 20-30%. I have a hard time believing Bitcoin is going to hold up in that situation.
Do you think these have any bearing on the current price condition of Bitcoin right now at 27?
I do think so. I mean, there's definitely the more uncertainty in the market, the more it's going to create hardships for price to continue up. And I think that's the biggest thing with Bitcoin and for the rest of the crypto markets. And by the way, I mean, I know you said we're going to get to gas fees, but I'm having a hard time figuring out how Ethereum has a major future when the gas fees are as high as they are. That's a big concern of mine. I've been a big fan of Ethereum, but that needs to be figured out. And again, we can get to that in a little bit. But going back to Binance, I mean, another issue out there that is going to make investors a little bit more hesitant with putting money into cryptocurrencies. And you just have to be careful in this scenario.
Your thoughts on how to trade ETH right now with what you're looking at on your charts?
So in terms of the chart itself, and I'll bring up my chart here so we can take a look. We're basically seeing ETH. We had that kind of blow off top right at the highs that took us to just over 2,100. And now we're kind of stuck in this range. And again, you do have a level underneath here, this upsloping trend line in this flat area around 1825 or so. On a technical basis, that is what you want to see ETH hold. If it breaks that, you head to 1,700. That breaks, you're heading down to the 1,500s. But right now, again, you're in this sideways consolidation. ETH to me looks like it's struggling. A couple things that I didn't like about the price action here. When you popped up, you had a few sideways days, and then it reversed 100% of the move. Here was a nice green day, resistance, and it reversed that move right away. So it seems like right now when ETH is popping, it's getting slammed down very, very hard, which means big money is looking to unload in this range, at least for now. So I'd just be a little bit careful. I mean, those things are just standing out to me in terms of the price action. And again, just something for everyone to kind of pay attention to.
Is there any group within the security side of what's happening with Berkshire Hathaway that you look at and say, all right, these are the areas I would really stay away from. This would be a repositioning or rebalancing of my portfolio?
Yeah, I mean, a couple things stood out from their big meeting over the last weekend. One was that they had no interest in getting into any of the banks, and I thought that was interesting because we think about some of where these regionals are trading, how discounted they look, and for Warren Buffett to not even be flinching at it and not even have any interest is very telling to me in terms of what he's seeing for the financial future of these banks and the financial system. So that was that kind of caught my attention because again, he was the one when during the Great Recession, he jumped into a bunch of the banks at these lows, like Goldman Sachs. He got the sweetest of deals and he was willing to do it back then. He's not willing to replay that this time. So I think that's something us as investors have to take into account. In terms of other areas of interest, it's hard to pinpoint what he'd be into, but I could see, biotech is kind of an interesting area if you're looking for kind of the safety of quality that pays a dividend, like an Amgen or something like that.
Right.
Those type of stocks, I could see him potentially putting money to work in.
What about metals? Do you feel like this is a direction for a lot of traders right now as they start to weather the potential of a securities adjustment here from the S&P? Gold has been holding a fairly good position at an all-time high. What are your thoughts on gold and silver?
I continue to be a huge bull on gold. Silver I am as well, but a longer term horizon because of the industrial side of it. And if we do slip into a recession, like I do expect in the second half of the year, then silver may struggle a little bit compared to gold. Yeah. But gold to me just continues to be the no-brainer. If panic is in the markets, gold is the place to go. If inflation stays high because jobs are doing well and everything like that, gold likely does well with inflation high as well. So to me, it just continues to go higher. I have an end of year price target of 2,300, and I do think it is achievable very easily by year end. Here we are at all-time highs, or basically just under all-time highs. It's been a remarkable run on gold. I still remember in 2021, the Bitcoiners just trouncing gold, saying it was dead. And it's just like, man, when you hear that, you got to go the opposite way on everything. Yep.
Yeah. Do you look at more on the ETF side, the minor stocks? How do you balance that in terms of a portfolio?
Yeah, so for me, it's the gold usually bought through the ETF, like the GLD or something. That to me is more kind of the base of my portfolio, where it's not going to get too crazy. I'm not going to lose a lot. I'm not going to make 100% on it, obviously, in a very short amount of time. The miners are much more the volatile players, right? They suffered in 2022 because inflation was high and gold's price was not keeping up with that. So as they're mining, their input costs were up high and gold was not able to be sold at a higher level as well. Now it's reversing. Now inflation is coming down and the miners costs are coming down and gold is actually starting to take off. So I think if you're aggressive, the miners are the place to be. If you're more conservative, then obviously stick with the metal itself.